Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another video. I'm your host, Rising Oblivion. Today, guys, is a little bit of a topic that I've wanted to cover for a very long time, and I figured since it's super relevant, might as well try and cover this and talk about this topic. Well, the topic today is going to be over basically just Japanese developers bringing games to places like the Epic Game Store and Steam. So, in recent news, we just figured out that Kingdom Hearts is going to be on the Epic Game Store. Yes, the entire catalog of Kingdom Hearts games making its way over to something like Epic Games is actually very, very ballsy of Square Enix to do. Not only are they going for not even Steam, but they're going for the Epic Game Store, which is honestly kind of nuts. To see a Japanese developer jump to something like that, jumping to PC, is very, strange. But in other terms, this does mean a lot when it actually comes to video game industry and Japanese developers finally trying to jump to newer audiences and why they might be doing so. In the long run, we have a lot of things we could talk about here when it comes to why porting stuff to PC is so good. Not only for just ports, but brand new games. Persona 5 Strikers, for instance, actually coming out right now. The day you're watching this video, it should be out. The deluxe version of the game allows you to play it a little bit earlier, so you're going to be able to have easy access to the game already, when it comes out. Because of the Western release, Persona 5 Strikers is going to be coming out on PC on Steam. I'm sure a lot of you know that. A lot of you who watch the channel are big Persona fans, so obviously you know that, but it kind of brings a question of why so many Japanese developers are finally now pushing to the West. It looks like the market there has finally been tapped. This finally is being, brought to attention. Square Enix kind of has already done this in the past, but just for certain, series that they've had. Final Fantasy, for instance. A bunch of the Final Fantasy games are now on Steam. Literally, go look. There is just about every single Final Fantasy game over there on Steam. There isn't things like Crisis Core, like, PSP type of games, or anything like the, games that would release on handhelds, but mainline console games, literally like Final Fantasy 7 through, I think, 15 are on there. Literally, tons and tons are on there. Even ones before 7 are on there. So it brings to attention that, man, a lot of these Japanese developers have found the potential that are on there now. Persona 4 Golden, which is going on in the background of this gameplay here, is another game that has been brought to attention to Atlas, Sega, showing that there is a very big market out there when it comes to people releasing their games on PC, especially older games that have been such a hard way to find. If you wanted to play Persona 4 Golden, guess what? All you could really do was buy a Vita. Now, I know a lot of you out there have talked about emulators. I know a lot of people emulate the game out there, but sometimes it's better off to actually give the game a actual, financial benefit to the company whenever you try and play it, because before, if you had to emulate the game, you're technically showing off the game, you're playing it, and you're not helping the developers out a whole lot. So having actual means to do so is really nice. Gabe Newell talked about this. He said something like, the player is willing to spend money on something if it is worth it. So they won't emulate it unless they know there's an easy way to actually access it, which is why he made stuff like Steam. And Persona 4 Golden is a very prime example. It's such a hard way to get Persona 4 Golden before that people didn't want to buy a Vita, so they emulated the game. So he considers something like that to be justified. I kind of consider it to be justified as well. I didn't necessarily pick on people if they emulated Persona 4 Golden, but the fact is, it's on Steam, and guess what? It exploded, being one of the most sold games that year on Steam last year. Insane. Absolutely insane. I think it was #1 when it comes to actually having controller compatibility for a game on Steam, which is absolutely insane. This is a PS2 game, yet for some reason it has super, super huge relevance, which is pretty nuts to think about when it comes to games and video games in general. That shows how much people have really been wanting a port of this. Jumping off of, the popularity of Persona 5, and there's no Persona 6 out, so where do? You go backwards, so Persona 4. So a lot of people, you could say, were trying to look for Persona 4 because of the popularity of Persona 5. You could say that, but there's also a huge fan base that has been wanting this game for such a long time. But that's just ports and stuff. Kingdom Hearts coming to Steam, or coming to, Epic Game Store, very good. I'm glad that's coming out. We can finally experience all that stuff on PC, not only running it better, looking better, but finally having the capability to at least just run the games without having to use an emulator on something like PC. It's finally here. But what does this exactly mean for the future? So for the future, we're finally going to be having new developers putting games on Steam, and at least for the Western release of games. That is why Persona 5 Strikers only had, the PC version come out alongside the Western release. It didn't come out with the Japanese release in the game, it came out with the Western release. They know that most of the people that are going to be playing on PC are from the Western audience. However, that does not mean that people in Japan don't play it on PC. I'm sure there are handfuls of people there just as well that would love to have the game come out on PC, but it looks like they're finally bringing this to attention. And more than likely, we have been seeing the rumors and potential leaks that maybe Shin Megmai Tensei 3 Nocturne HD Remaster is also going to be having a PC release as well. Sort of makes sense. They're doing this with Persona 5 Strikers, waiting for the Western release to coincide with the PC release, so there's a very good chance that when it comes to Shin Megami Tensei 3 that we're going to be seeing, we've already had, a year and some since, we've had Strikers, so who really knows? Hopefully it's not a year plus for us to get SMT. SMT should be coming out fairly soon. They said first, second-ish quarter, so within a couple months we should be expecting this, but it's not a wild thing to think about this game also having a PC release. SMT3 is a beloved big game. Probably just as big as P4 for P4 fans and Persona fans. It makes sense for SMT fans. SMT3 is sort of that same counterpart in terms of hype, just lovability from the entire audience. It makes sense for SMT3 to also have this. It looks like Japanese developers are finally starting to see the potential that is there when it comes to PC. Not only that, the potential brings in money. It makes games relevant again, as if the Persona series already wasn't huge enough. P4G coming out on Steam made it even huger and exploded up even more. I've seen tons of people who never even played a Persona game decide that, you know what, Persona 4 Golden looks a little bit better than P5, so I'm going to try that game instead. I've heard the story and the characters are better, so they jump to that one and then jump to other games in the series. If anything, it gets people more hype. It brings bigger news, more channels like mine end up covering this type of stuff. It's a really cool thing to see happening right before our eyes, is seeing that the whole series in general can be beloved by a brand new audience, people who don't have certain consoles. Kingdom Hearts, for instance, was only on PlayStation for such a very, very long time, and then it jumped to Xbox, then it jumped to this year, I guess, now to being on PC. So pretty much anybody can play the Kingdom Hearts games. There is no longer a contract with that. When it comes to SMT5, there is a contract, so don't expect SMT5 to be on PC. However, we might see potential remasters, ports, things like that from not only just Atlus, but many other Japanese companies having these ports come to PC. I mean, we have the big ones. We have Final Fantasy, we have Kingdom Hearts, we have Persona. We're gonna have SMT now probably as well, so it makes sense to have all of these other companies alongside, seeing this type of thing happen, trying to bring some competition. Don't be surprised if we end up seeing some other stuff from other Japanese developers. I think Yakuza was even talking about bringing some more of their games over to Steam and things like that. It's not a big assumption to assume that we're going to have these other Japanese developers try to also push their stuff to PC and also get ahead of the market compared to all these other developers, because if you see competition trying to take one market, you don't want them to have the entire market. We do not want Atlus or Square Enix to have the entire PC market when it comes to Japanese developed games. All these other developers are going to come in and try and get in the way and trying to get their piece of the PC market as well, which is, in our perspective, really good for us because that means better sales, more games, stuff like that. We also get to support these companies that we had to emulate these games on. It makes sense from both the player perspective and the developer perspective of having these games on Steam and finally having these games that we've wanted to play for so long be able to finally be ran on a PC. Not to mention just how much better it sometimes runs on PC. P4G had some issues here and there, I believe, at the start, and if you have a third company try and port the thing over to Steam or to Epic Game Store or whatever third-party type of, retailer, I guess you could say, on PC, sometimes if it's ran through a third-party company, it can sometimes come out kind of bad and not work exactly as intended, because sometimes they are really old games and it doesn't always translate super well to PC, especially when you try to run it at like 60 frames or upscale it, stuff like that. That is why sometimes there's limitations on games when it comes to porting them, because they were never ever meant to run at like 120 frames. Whenever this game was being made, 30 frames seemed like it was something that was, you know, of the future. So it makes sense why having games like these sometimes are not always the best when ported to PC, but I think it's better than nothing. But I think it's going to wrap up this video, guys. This is my little discussion of, you know, Japanese developers and porting things. Hopefully we see a lot more things like this in the future, and for the 25th anniversary of Persona, man, fingers crossed, hopefully we see some more ports and things like that coming over to Steam. I would love to see some sort of Persona 3 thing happening on Steam. That would be really cool. Heck, it doesn't even have to be Steam, but it would be nice to have them all cataloged there, all the Atlas stuff cataloged on Steam. But who knows? Maybe we'll see something like that for the 25th anniversary of Persona, and, you know, maybe something for Persona 1 or 2, potentially. We'll have to see, guys. Technically, Persona 1 kind of did have a iOS sort of dub thing, so it's something that could happen. We might be able to see something like that. So let's just hope and pray that the Atlas gods come down on us and give us some more Persona stuff, some more ports and remasters. I think that's what we're all hoping for. But I think that's going to wrap up this video, guys. Like, comment, subscribe for more content. As always, I will see you on the next video. Thank you so much for watching.